Hi, I'm Eddie. I was ill a couple of weeks back, so inevitably spent all of my inside time reading 7 books by the new Nobel Prize winner in order to work out for myself why she won the prize. Annie Ernaux was, according to the committee, awarded the 2022 Nobel Prize in Literature for the courage and clinical acuity with which she uncovers the roots, estrangements, and collective restraints of personal memory. So we're going to take a few of these themes, namely courage, narrative and autofiction, and collective restraints of personal memory. And we're going to have a chat about them through the lens of the 7 books that I've read. Does that sound like fun? Well, we're doing it. But first, to set the scene, Nobel Prize watching is a long favoured tradition in online literary circles. Every year you get to experience the truly deranged build-up in which someone is always insisting that one of their favourites is going to win it, whether it's a Haruki Murakami, a Cormac McCarthy, Pynchon and Adonis. Even more frustrating is the insistence every year that it's going to be someone who is politically potent that wins the prize. For example, this year the bookies' favourite was Salman Rushdie, even though any regular Nobel head could tell you that there was very little chance that he was going to win the prize. Because when you get to it, without fail, the Nobel Committee would come and blindside you with some little-known Tanzanian author you've never heard of, or someone with controversial links to genocide denial, or Bob Dylan. Even their conventional choices, such as Kazuo Ishiguro, came earlier in their career than people would have expected. Not to mention, this is not a committee that's been without controversy in recent years, with certain members of the committee having to drop out of it for reasons. So it was a pleasant surprise this year to see that one of the perennial never wins actually won it. In a recent article titled "These Novels Probably Won't Win the Nobel Prize," Annie Ernaux was described as the pioneer of a kind of autofiction that Knausgaard and Kusk have brought to recent prominence. Now, I was familiar with Ernaux simply in that her name always cropped up whenever it was time to make one of these Nobel Prize prediction posts. But I'd never read her, so taking advantage of the fact that I couldn't leave my bed and my deep love of the genre of autofiction, I decided to read as many of her books as I can. 7 of her books. I'm going to chat a little bit about what I thought about them, and also chat a little bit about why I think she won the Nobel Prize when she did. Firstly, as to who she is, Annie Ernaux was born in Lillebonne in Normandy in 1940 to parents who ran a grocery cafe, the story of which is covered in her work A Man's Place. Her late teens and experiences both at summer camp and in the UK were covered by A Girl's Story, but she's perhaps more famously associated with the town of Cergy, a kind of suburb of Paris, a place she diaried about extensively in the work Exteriors. She's primarily a memoirist, writing short and punchy works about rupture points in her life, including her abortion in the early 1960s, her affair with a Soviet diplomat in the 1980s, or her relationship with her father. Due to her poor background, she's an outsider as far as the French literary elite were concerned. She was deeply politically leftist, and was able to bring a kind of insider-outsider dichotomy to her writing. So looking at the reasons that the Nobel Committee picked her for the prize this year, the first thing that stands out to me is courage. I believe the reason they highlighted courage was because of her work Happening, a recounting of her illegal backroom abortion. Ernaux found out that she was pregnant in 1963, a week before the Kennedy assassination. However, abortion was only legalized in France 10 years later in 1975. So her retelling of that experience for the first time in the late 1990s was arguably seen as an act of courage. It's a disturbing but important read, I think, though I'm not necessarily sure that Ernaux would have described it as a courageous work per se. For her, the period was one of unbearable sluggishness. There was no chance that her and her partner were going to go through with the pregnancy, so she never presents it as like a courageous choice that she made. She vividly portrays the hard truth of the abortion process and methods, bringing you into the mundanity of the everyday. For example, going to visit her parents while she was miscarrying and bleeding internally. She also takes a look at French society through the people that she interacts with over that year. Whether it was a fellow student who seduced her when she tried to come for help, or a judgmental doctor who was still willing to slip her a few pills as long as he looked the other way, she skillfully displayed the ways in which society's attitudes changed towards a woman as soon as she became pregnant outside of wedlock. Ernaux wrote Happening because she felt guilty. Not for having an abortion, but in her own words, for the fact that it had happened to me, I had done nothing about it. Is courage the right word? Maybe. But traditionally, frank memoirs alone aren't enough of a reason to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Clearly, it's the case that abortion is a much discussed issue right now, and it could be argued that the committee awarded Ernaux in order to be political without going for the obvious choice of Salman Rushdie. However, I think it does a disservice to the rest of Ernaux's work to imply that she won the prize simply because her themes were on trend. Another reason given by journalists for Annie Ernaux winning the Nobel Prize in Literature was her contribution to the genre of autofiction. Like, she's literally on the Wikipedia page for that genre. ignore the fact that like 30 other authors are. I personally love autofiction. Autofiction is my boyfriend. Autofiction is my god. In layman's terms, it's a genre in which fiction and autobiography intersect. Yeah, shocker. Yeah, you never could have guessed that one, could you? An author will embellish a real-life story with narrative techniques, with additional characters, with entirely made-up plot lines, in order to try and get to a kind of more profound and deeper truth than you would get from straightforward autobiography. Ernaux's contribution to this genre is the 37-page novella called Simple Passion. Simple Passion tells the story of a love affair between a woman in her 40s, an Annie Ernaux stand-in, and an Eastern European diplomat. But like in a fun autofictional way. Ernaux's narrator is always reflecting on the way that she's telling the story as she tells the story. How the man she's presenting, the real man, is far more inaccessible than the written man of the novel. Ernaux plays with structure in a skillful and engaging way, making us reflect on the walls that we build in relationships and the way that we can never truly know each other. This writing is powerful and moving in its own right? However, it's even more impressive when read alongside her diaries of the period, which she published with the title Getting Lost. Whilst her real diaries of her love affair with a Soviet diplomat are repetitive and a bit of a slog to get through, her novella kind of cuts through all this and presents the reality of obsessiveness of one-sided love in a way that feels truer than her real life story. It's a very difficult thing to pull off and highlights this acuity or sharpness that the Nobel Prize Committee pointed to, her ability to pinpoint a certain feeling and immerse the reader in it. I love it. Arguably the most interesting part of the Nobel Prize Committee's flavour text is the bit at the end, collective restraints of personal memory. What I have found when reading Ernaux's text is that she's able to somehow tap into kind of a national mood of a generation. For years, arguably her masterpiece is towering ambitious, but also deeply rooted in her own story. She takes us through both major events in her own life and in the history of France, showing the way that human memory is both intrinsically linked to, but also limited by, the world around us. Our memory is outside us, in a rainy breath of time, she says. The Years fundamentally traces what Ernaux thinks has been lost in French society, as well as what she's been recounting in basically all of her work. The move from the common ground of hunger and fear, in which everyone was equally affected by events, through to the failure of the socialist presidency of Mitterrand, through to the present day in which everyone is both more interconnected but also potentially disparate than ever. I absolutely implore everyone to read it. It looks at big events and takes profound meaning from them without being cliche or over the top. And this is the strength I think the committee has identified. They described it as uncompromising and written in plain language, scraped clean. And I can feel that. Lines such as, "She will go within herself, only to retrieve the world," so succinctly convey her message and make you go, wow, yeah, of course, that's right. Our stories are so obviously interconnected with our collective past, and reading The Years really brought that to the forefront of my mind. Ernaux is also boosted in her mission by her relatively humble background, her status as an outsider coming into an intellectual class that she's not a part of, but able to observe, provides a really interesting and unique authorial voice. My Kindle copy is like highlighted with notes on every page. I just can't get over her writing. Phrases like, "With all the intermingling of concepts, it was increasingly difficult to find a phrase of one's own," the kind that, when silently repeated, helped one live, are ones that I can see myself coming back to for years. So yes, I can absolutely see the argument that her depiction of the collective restraint of personal memory is a strong reason for her to have won the Nobel Prize. Fundamentally, however, we literally cannot know why she won the prize, other than by this deep analysis of the phrase that the committee provided us. We can make guesses all we want, like the people saying that abortion is the primary reason that she won, but I cannot express to you enough how closed and leak-free these committees are. We can't even know who she was up against for 50 years. Authors regularly die without ever knowing that they were in contention. Spare a thought for my boy Thomas Hardy, who was nominated 13 times without a win. At some point, you've got to think if you were the second best person for 13 years, maybe you're just the best person. And he probably never found out how close he was, which is the tragic thing. I think we can look at this Nobel Prize text all we want, and I've seen ample evidence that she kind of fits into all the descriptors that they've presented, even if she wouldn't arguably agree with them herself. Reading 7 of her works has encouraged me to think more deeply about narratives and the reasons that we tell them and the way that we tell them. There are also things I didn't highlight here, particularly her work Exteriors and the way that she describes Cergy, the kind of new town suburb of Paris, that highlight her work as an urban imagist. I would recommend an article in the New Yorker which goes into this in more depth, which I will link in the description. But when it comes down to it, I think the best person to describe Ernaux's strategy for writing is Ernaux herself. Maybe the true purpose of my life is for my body, my sensations, and my thoughts to become writing. In other words, something intelligible and universal, causing my existence to merge into the lives and heads of other people. That purpose and mission, for me, encapsulates what I think is so great about Ernaux's writing. And I'm really glad I read seven of her works, because I think it helped me to understand and encapsulate the reasons why the Nobel Prize Committee saw something in her, and why she will stand as an important figure in modern French literature. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and it provided somewhat of an introduction to Ernaux and her work and what the Nobel Prize Committee might have seen in her. I appreciate you all. Cheers. Alright, goodbye. Goodbye now. Bye-bye.